salam, and welcome. Today, we're bringing you a conversation between the authors Yasmin Zaher and Saleem Haddad, where they talk about Yasmin's recent book, The Coin, as well as Saleem's forthcoming book, Floodlines. I'm joined by my colleague Sarah Yassin, tuning in from London to help guide us through what I can only describe as a brave, layered, and deeply honest discussion about identity politics, belonging, and navigating the literary world while carrying so many histories. Sarah, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, Bisan?
Good. So, what did you think about this conversation?
I think that there was so much that came through in that conversation that I think a lot of our listeners will find really intriguing. I think that for those of you out there who haven't read The Coin, it is a phenomenal book. And I think Yasmin was put in an interesting position as a writer where she wrote this book that ultimately is about a Palestinian woman who is in New York and is sort of navigating an estrangement and having to think about how that intersects with the genocide because of the timing of when her book was published. So I think that that served as a really interesting springboard for the discussion. So I think that both her and Saleem were talking about what it meant to bring themselves into their writing and what it meant to bring the wider context into the conversation. And I think Saleem does a really interesting job.
He was doing an interesting job and also drawing on his own experience. I loved it when she asked him, "Did you come out as a writer first or a gay person?" I was like, will he answer this? Does it really matter? And but they engaged also. What struck me most about this conversation is that I've heard interviews for both of them, and they were having an intimate exchange of their experiences, not only as writers but as the label that they were put into as Palestinian writers, as Arab writers. And this is why I say it's like the whole identity politics is coming up, regardless of how much they try to escape from it, because it has an impact on their work. But they talk about how they're escaping from, I wouldn't say escaping, but sort of like try to rebel against the constraints that will put them into boxes of what defines you as a writer.
And I think that was what was really interesting, right? Was that you had this conversation between two people who, first off are Arabs who grew up in the Arab world and write in English. And you can really see in this conversation how they have both thought about how to be able to speak on their own terms and what it has meant for them to define how their identity relates to their writing, which I think the kind of like moment that they're both responding to sort of forced them into boxes that they didn't necessarily want to be attached to. But I think what was also very fascinating in this discussion is that within a kind of Western context anyways, by virtue of you saying that you're Palestinian, it becomes a political thing. And I think that it was very fascinating to hear Saleem talk about Guapa, which there were so many things that he articulated well in it, in terms of sort of just how he sees the West and kind of like looking at how progressive spaces kind of hold this sort of like colonial mentality, right? And I think what I found really interesting was that he was saying that he saw it as a story about the revolutions first, and then that the gay like sort of storyline was part of that, but whereas like it was received in sort of like the flip way
as a gay novel.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for him, sort of having him and Yasmin both sort of like grapple with the fact that their work is political by default because of what kind of story it tells. And I think it's really interesting to see how they both navigate that as a writer.
Indeed. Thank you, Sarah, for joining me.
Thank you. We hope you guys enjoy this episode.
Hi, Saleem.
Hi, Yasmin. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I read The Coin this year, and I think it was one of the best books that I've read definitely this year, if not for the last few years. So really great job.
And I read Guapa when it came out in 2016, which was the year when I started writing the coin. And I read it as kind of like as an inspiration, really, for what you can do as an Arab writer, writing in English, kind of being a little bit transgressive as well.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank
so
you.
thank you for that.
That means a lot. I wonder if a good place to start our conversation is from to pick up on something you wrote in an essay that was published in January 2024, I think. Um, in The Drift. The essay was called Abolish the Categories. And a few writer friends sent me this essay wanting to get my thoughts. And it really prompted a lot of conversations. And rather than me trying to summarize what the essay said, I wonder if you can just tell me a little bit about what you were preoccupied with in the essay.
Huh, interesting. So, yeah, I think, well, the categories kind of refers to literary categories, right? And the idea, I think, came to me from trying to organize my bookshelf, like trying to organize the fiction in my bookshelf. And the way I do it naturally, for some reason, is based on geography. So I will do like Middle Eastern literature, African literature, literature from East Asia. And then I thought about myself and like where I would fit. And I didn't quite, I am a Palestinian writer, but I write in English. So I was like putting myself at the edge of the category. Um, and yeah, just thinking about these terms of who we are as writers and how that defines us, and feeling very strongly that I don't necessarily fit in any of those categories, which I think you probably have a very similar experience, just by virtue probably of being from different countries.
Yes, no, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, I mean, my background is very mixed, and I grew up in a lot of different countries. So I always find myself not entirely fitting into a certain category, especially when, as is often the case with literature, it's by nationality. Technically, I could fit into three of those: Lebanon, Jordan, and British. But I wouldn't categorize my writing as any of those things. And even my next novel that's coming out, whereas Guapa was not really set in a particular country, my next novel is very much rooted in Iraq. But I still feel quite strange about it being considered an Iraqi novel.
Right. And I feel strange about The Coin being considered a Palestinian novel, because it takes place in New York, first of all, and also because its main character is so unrepresentative of Palestinians in a way. Like um she's rich, she's promiscuous, she's not under any control of the patriarchy. Um and yeah, it's hard to belong, but not to, it's almost like you love your culture, but you feel like it doesn't love you back, like you don't belong in that box. And that's something that I struggled with a lot while publishing. Yeah.
While publishing or while writing?
While writing, I was in my secret chamber where I wasn't thinking about anyone. I wasn't thinking about audience. I was in my madness. But then when it came time to go out there, to be vulnerable, to be judged, really, like so much of publishing is about being judged. Um, then I started to have a lot of anxieties around that.
Where did you find the coin fitting in? Not by you, but by readers and publishers. Was it sold as a Palestinian novel? Did you feel that it was sold that?
Absolutely, it was sold as a Palestinian novel. It came out 9 months into the genocide. So there was a lot of desire for Palestinian narratives, um, coming out of a good place where people wanted to understand what's going on and to support, but also coming out of a place that I liked a lot less, which is like, people want to virtue signal and people want to be in. And yeah, it was a mixed bag of emotions to get so much attention because of timing that was very negative?
It's funny because when Guapa came out, um, it came out in 2016 at a very particular point. But when I was writing it, I didn't think that I was writing a gay novel. I thought that I was writing an Arab Spring novel, actually. And that's how, when I was pitching it to publishers and to agents, that's how I was pitching it. The gay stuff kind of seemed only relevant insofar as I was trying to demonstrate the relationship between the personal and the political. Um, and it was a bit, and at first, when the novel was marketed and then received, the gay aspect of the novel came into focus, and I was very ambivalent about that.
So you were put in the gay queer category.
For sure.
And how do you feel about this category? Do you think that's a legitimate category?
I think I've there's two things at play. The first is that I was surprised by how important the gay element was for gay Arab readers, and that it was something that they felt very strongly in a positive way about the book. It was important for them, that gay angle. And I think hearing that from those readers made me more open to the idea of seeing Guapa as a gay novel, whatever that means. I mean, I think with literature, and what I really loved about the essay that you had written is I think that the best kind of literature is one that transcends these categories and that kind of doesn't really try and fit into these categories. And I think I approach my own writing that way, in a sense that I think these categories are fundamentally maybe not necessarily capitalist, but certainly consumerist, because they're about how to pitch things and how to fit things into certain easily digestible labels. And I think that's fine, but it doesn't concern me as a writer. When I'm sitting in my room writing, I'm not thinking about where this would necessarily fit in, and I don't care ultimately where it would fit in. Although in the context of Guapa, I did care because I was very concerned about the pinkwashing element. And that's why I felt like I needed to have a lot of control over.
Can you say more about the pinkwashing element? What do you mean exactly?
For sure. So the novel came out in 2016. And this was also the time where like identity politics and liberal identity politics was at its peak. And I was really nervous about the idea that the novel would be used as a way to kind of bludgeon Arab culture and society. Because the novel, when I was writing the novel, I was critical of everything. But I was scared that readers and otherwise would pick up only on the parts of the novel that criticized Arab society and forget about all the other things as well, or not see it in a broader context. And so I felt when I was talking about the novel, I was so careful about how I should frame what I'm saying.
Yeah, to not be self-hating, to not come off as self-hating.
Exactly. Or at least like be an equal opportunity hater, which is what the novel is, right? It's just hating everyone.
As all great novels.
So I just needed to make sure that was included in all of my interviews and all of the events that I was part of.
Okay, so you say that when you write, you don't think about the marketing categories of your book or how it's going to be presented in the press, let's say, but do you think about your readers, especially now that you've written 2 novels? Do you think about your readers more now with the second novel?
So actually it was the opposite. I think when I was writing Guapa, I was writing from this very anxious position where, well, the first draft is different because the first draft is really just kind of me putting everything on the page without really thinking too much about anyone. And then, but in edits and Guapa was edited, as you know, any novel goes through years of edits, and Guapa was edited maybe 10 or 15 times before it was finally published. And through these various revisions, I had this very anxious way of editing according to different audiences. So every paragraph I would read from the perspective of, let's say, a middle class gay Arab man, or, a sort of a conservative right wing Dutch person. And I would just try and wear these different hats and read the novel through those lenses and try and, as much as possible, subvert expectations of all of these different readers. With the second novel, I thought much less about audience. I thought about readers, but more, I think it was partly because I'm now more aware of my readership. I'm now more aware of the people who enjoy my writing and read my work. And I think that eased a lot of my own anxieties. And I think I approached the editing process with more confidence, not just in myself, but also for confidence in the reader, giving them a lot more credit, making them do a little bit more work, not necessarily feeling like I have to explain things
Yeah,
in the way that I
trusting them.
felt. Exactly. How have you found it? Have you found a shift from your first to your second?
Yes, definitely. But the coin also went through many, many reiterations, of course. But I only really started wearing the critic's hat at the very end, maybe in the last few months of revision. I would be like, okay, how would an American Jew perceive this sentence? How would my mother perceive this sentence? And but I was very aware of not wanting to self-censor, and wanting to keep the work kind of raw and wild, because that's just something that is very dear to my heart in literature, and like a quality that I didn't want to lose. My second novel that I'm writing now, it all takes place in Palestine. So, and we didn't mention this, but both of us are Arab writers who grew up in the Middle East, but write in English. So our audience is predominantly English speaking. And I'm a lot more aware of, what you're saying about needing to explain things, needing to clarify things, you're almost holding the reader's hand more than I was when I was writing about New York. And yeah, because in New York, my character walks down Fifth Avenue, and I don't need to say anything about that. Like everybody knows what Fifth Avenue is, but does everybody know like Shari'a Salahuddin, like what it's like? I don't think so. Yeah, so that's an interesting experience of almost being alienated from my own work, because I'm writing things not necessarily like how I would consume them naturally. There's a little bit more crutches in the text.
Mhm. That's interesting, because I feel like with my second novel, actually, I took a slightly different approach, where I felt like I don't necessarily need to explain East London to a reader in the same way that I don't need to explain the neighborhood of Shmisani in Amman to the reader. I will just put those in, and if the reader wants to know more about either of these places, they can then do the work and
I
research.
think that's probably a better literary choice, is
Mm-hmm.
to not is to be natural, to not explain, because otherwise you get something that all of us probably really don't like when we're reading, which is that we're being told what to think. you know we're being told who's moral, who's not moral. Is this character rich? Is this character poor?
That's something that I'm really trying to fight against, which is this expectations around what a certain novel should be, whether it's quote unquote a gay novel or an Iraqi novel.
Yeah. Well, I think as long as you as the author are aware of the fact that this is an upper middle class setting for a novel, then yeah, of course, why not? The problems come more when you have these characters who are spending money and you don't know where the money's coming from. Like you need to kind of create you need to have like a class infrastructure in the novel to support whatever is going to happen in it.
Very true. I wanted to talk about language because, like you mentioned, we both write in English, and I'm wondering whether you feel any anxiety about the fact that you write fiction in English.
No, anxiety, no. I'm sort of like just at peace with who I am at this point. But I would say there's a little bit of grief or a feeling that maybe I'm losing something or I'm neglecting a part of myself. On the one hand. On the other hand, I have a tough time with Arabic language and literature because I find it I find it too rich, you know? I find it a little bit too sugary for my own style. And I think in my style sensibility, I'm more of an American writer. Does that make sense?
I think it does make sense. I wonder if you can maybe explain it a bit more.
I like short, direct, to the point, maybe borderline vulgar.
Functional.
Yeah, writing. And Arabic, just by nature of the language, is really like ornate and swirly and like stretchy,
And quite metaphorical also.
And that's not my style sensibility.
Mm-hmm. And the coin has not been translated into Arabic, has it?
No, it hasn't. Has Guapa?
No, we've had a lot of trouble trying to get it translated into Arabic, partly due to the subject matter and partly due to challenges with
In the industry,
Arabic
probably.
in the industry
Yeah.
in general. Exactly.
Yeah. And what if there was like a bootleg copy of Guapa in Arabic? Would you be happy with that?
I would
like
be happy
free
with
PDF.
I would be I would be happy with it. I would be totally fine with it. So if there are any translators who are interested, please do get in touch. Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of anxiety around the fact that I was writing Guapa in English rather than Arabic. And I think the character also grapples with this anxiety himself. Anxiety of articulating himself in English versus Arabic is something that kind of emerges as a concern for him in the novel.
Are you one of those people who have different personalities in different languages?
Yes, definitely. And it's funny because I've been learning Portuguese because I live in Lisbon, and so I find this new personality emerging also in Portuguese, which is interesting. But that's the beauty of language because it totally opens up this world.
What's your Portuguese personality like?
Self-deprecating, I would say. I'm not sure whether that's partly because the self-deprecation emerges because I'm not confident in the language, and so I then try and kind of poke fun at myself and make myself a clown. Yeah, I don't have to be.
Interesting. So I started learning French 3 years ago, and my French personality, surprisingly, my Parisian personality is a lot friendlier than my other personalities. And I think it's also something to do with being insecure, being like knowing that you're not all that. So you have to compensate with other things. So I'm a lot more forthcoming and, and funny and nice.
And how are you in Arabic?
Kind of maybe a little bit more dry and misanthropic.
Okay.
And English is definitely like my, it's my smart language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely my heady language.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
It's the language that we were educated in.
Definitely. And also it's the language where I think, at least for my case, I can only speak for myself. When I was trying to discover, I grew up, my formative years were in Jordan, and when I was trying to understand the world and understand myself and understand my sexuality, I had to turn to English in order to do that, because that's the stuff that was written about all of these things was in English. In Arabic, a lot of the stuff that I was exposed to felt very didactic and kind of propagandist. And so I think English was the source for me to kind of explore the world. And I think that's why I ended up gravitating towards English as a language uh, that I think in, that I write in. And
For me, it's like it's in a way, it's the language that liberated me in a sense. It was also because it was the language that I read in,
and have you found a way to kind of go back to Arabic and kind of reevaluate your relationship with Arabic?
a little bit, but I think I have a chapter of my life ahead of me that will be dedicated to that.
Hmm. I feel the same. I think it's, um, even though I've made peace with writing in English, there's a part of me that also is aware of, um, well, let me say I've made peace with writing in English also because I think that English is the language to communicate to the world.
Yeah, right.
Is the best language to communicate to the world.
Yeah,
And I would like to communicate to the world. I see my audience as being a global audience, and I think that the concerns that I write about are relevant across the world. Um, but I think there is something that sits uneasy with me about using the language of empire to do this. And I think I would like to not abandon it, but build an alternative ecosystem in which I am thinking and writing. And Arabic would be the natural ecosystem to do that in for a multitude of reasons.
yeah. I agree with you about English being, yeah, it's the language of empire, but what that means also is that you can communicate with different parts of the empire. So, for example, I have a lot of my readers are like diasporic Indians, for example,
Yeah.
um, or you know, like British Muslim girls from, I don't know, Somalia, and I feel like yeah, like English allows me to do that in a way that Arabic would not allow me to do that. And going back to how we started all of this is that we are not trying to, like, literature is not about speaking to your own people. It's about speaking to humanity, or to people who have something in common with you. And me as a reader, I was 14 years old reading Catcher in the Rye. What did I care? What I had in common in terms of identity with the character in that novel? I didn't care. It was something. It was something a lot deeper than that.
Absolutely.
And I think with like the politics of the Middle East, of Palestine, we're kind of losing touch a little bit of the universal, in a way that as a novelist I feel like it's important to reiterate and to not fall into a place that divides.
So what do you, if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that you would like your writing to speak to something more universal than
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
be.
Like for me, the coin is about a lonely woman. It's not about a Palestinian woman. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
and if I can succeed, and if I could do that, like if I can communicate that, then that's when I succeed in my own view as someone who loves literature. Not if I like transmitted the ideological message of my people.
Hmm. You know, I totally see what you're saying, um, and this is not to discount the universal message within the coin, but I also, when I read the coin, I read it very much as a Palestinian novel, um, and I mean, I don't know whether this was intentionally done or not by you, but for example, the obsession with cleanliness that the character has, I kept thinking about ethnic cleansing as. And I don't know whether that was something that you intentionally did or whether this is just something that I read, but that felt very clear to me, the parallels. And I think there's this like beautiful prickly tension in the novel between meaning and meaninglessness, that the reader is continuously confronted with. And I think because of that, and also because of the novel's surrealism, it was, I think, the only piece of fiction around Palestine that I was able to consume in the last 2 years, because there was a sort of madness to the novel that really mirrored the madness of of the times that we're living in now. I wonder how that sits with you saying that.
Yeah. Also, when it was published, so I wrote it before everything started, of course, and then it was published after. So I had to have this moment where I was like, I had to reread the book and be like, oh, is it still relevant? Like, has our reality changed so much that this book is now like doesn't stand on its own anymore? Um, and because it's playing between meaning and meaninglessness, and because it's so much in the surreal, and because it's not taking place in Palestine, it was able to kind of like float above the current affairs and not sink, not sink in places where reality had changed so much that the book kind of loses its force.
Or sink into over explaining, which I think
Yeah.
the coin does really well. It doesn't explain itself. It just is.
Yeah. And my method of writing is like, I'm really in the subconscious. I wasn't thinking about ethnic cleansing when I was thinking about cleaning. When I was writing about
Interesting.
cleaning, I was thinking about my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, who are all clean freaks, you know? And maybe that has something to do with cleansing. Or maybe, what I came to understand is that cleaning is a method of exerting control when you have no control in your life, and when you've been when you've been displaced and moved. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, in terms of that, I think if you're true to your intuition, to yourself, to what's coming out of you, it will resonate with some big ideas, just because that's the nature of things. But you don't have to start with a big idea.
I totally agree. And when I teach writing, this is what I always tell people. It's so much of writing is about tuning into your subconscious and kind of getting out of your own way. And then just trusting that your subconscious will guide you to where you need to go, or where the story is telling you, and that you will kind of, or at least this is my approach. Oftentimes I find that when I start writing on especially a novel, I'm guided by certain questions that I don't know necessarily exactly what they are. And it's only in the novel's completion that I understand the question that I was trying to answer right at the very
100%.
beginning.
I'm the same, yeah. I don't know what I'm doing in the beginning. I have no idea.
In retrospect, what are some of the questions that you think you were obsessed with when you were writing The Coin?
I think in retrospect now, I see that it's a novel of exile, you know. It's about leaving your country and having your country still be a part of you, and having to negotiate that impulse that can be positive but can also be negative, can also hinder you. I think I was also dealing a lot with the body, questions of the body, sexuality, also. What do you think? What do you think was the undercurrent for Guapa?
For Guapa, I think it was um, the struggle to find your place in society. I think that's the question that I was trying to deal with.
The struggle to find your place in society that you're from.
Yes, yeah, and I think perhaps also, reaching to the end of the novel, I think I kind of was left feeling the sense of actually the ambivalence about finding your place, and being at peace with that ambivalence, and maybe even embracing the out of placeness in some way. I think that's perhaps the question that I was dealing with Guapa. Yeah. And with the second novel, I think it was about grief a lot of the times, and about how to digest and incorporate history in your own psyche. How do you kind of come to terms with all of history in your own sort of present. I think those are some of the questions of the new.
Did you do a lot of research for Floodlines? The second.
I did. It was very research focused. I think I spent just 2 years doing intensive research, from everything ranging from Iraqi history over the last 100 years to Mesopotamian mythology, climate change, Iraqi art, um, many other things, many other things.
And were you moved by the desire for knowledge? Like, did you want to know all these things, or did you want to support your writing with all these things?
I think it was a mixture of both. I think it was also, I started writing this or researching this in 2015, and I was very anxious for a number of reasons, one of which was Guapa coming out. And I was just really crippled with anxiety. And the anxiety took the form of this terror at the fact that something I had written was coming out, and that once it was out there, there would be no way of taking it back in. It would be kind of there in history, forever archived there. And I sort of became obsessed with the idea of archiving and the idea of history and the past, and through there. And then I found one way that helped me deal with the anxiety was actually going back really further in history, like to ancient Mesopotamian mythology, looking at all of archaeology. And for some reason, I found that very soothing, because I think maybe it demonstrated how small I was, and also how little is left from then.
Yeah. Yeah, the immortality of the author is kind of a myth in a way, because so many authors get forgotten.
It's true. Yes. How have you? I guess I'd like to know, now that the book has come out for you, The Coin. It's been a year and a bit now that the book has been out. If you've had some time to reflect on the book's reception.
Well, it had a very good reception. I mean, I won the Dylan Thomas Award, which is an incredible award for young authors. But also, I don't actually read the reviews. I just ask somebody else to read them and to tell me if there's anything bad in them. I try to not be too connected with the reception of my book, and I try to stay in my bubble and just like, if I could be an author writing my first book for the rest of my life, like, that would be a great place. I think it's a very raw and exciting place to be in. There's something innocent about it that I try to keep.
Yes, there's definitely a freshness when you haven't fully kind of been categorized, so to speak, as a certain kind of writer, writing in a certain kind of style and way, and you're just kind of discovering it for the first time. It's a really beautiful part of the process.
What's your process like? You said that you were researching for 2 years, but how did you survive for 2 years without writing?
I work in aid work.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Or did you mean it more in a...
No, I mean mentally. No,
mentally.
How did
Well,
you
I was writing,
Okay.
but I was also, I had written a few short stories, one of which was the sci-fi story about Palestine and Palestine plus 100. I made a short film, so I was doing other things as well. And I'm always writing. Maybe it's the same for you, but so little of what I write ends up seeing the light of day. There's just so much nonsense that I'm just constantly churning out.
Of course, yeah. It's the volume of what gets published versus what got typed is indescribable. Like there's no comparison. I think probably like 2 words out of every page like end up getting published.
I saw that you had mentioned a few times that The Coin was inspired or influenced by Clarice Lispector, who's one of my favorite writers as well. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about.
Well, she's a really wild writer. Huh? She writes without logic. She's wild. She sometimes doesn't finish her sentences. Um, she's a very free writer, and I think one of the things that I want to do is to be a free writer. I think you too. That's probably one of the things that move you.
For sure.
Um,
And I wonder whether how much also this has to do with being Palestinian and feeling like you need to be explaining yourself all the time.
or how much that has to do with being Palestinian and finding a place where you can be free.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, like it can be very like writing. If you can, like writing can be very liberatory. Like you're living this fantasy life where you do everything, you think everything, you say everything, you express yourself fully.
Mm-hmm.
And for people whose fundamental experience has been of oppression, I think that's just such a gift, you know. It's like a place where you can go and where you're playing and you're happy and you're, yeah, like for me, like on an emotional level, it's a very happy place.
That's really important. And I feel like that's something that I always struggle with myself because I think it is for me, um, I, reaching that place that you describe of this sense of freedom and happiness doesn't come naturally to me, even in fiction. And it's something that I have to actively remind myself to do. I'm always kind of, even when I'm writing fiction, sometimes it's very much rooted in this sense of trying to understand the world as it is now in a very real way. And I think I sometimes have to remind myself to have fun in the process as well and liberate myself. Um, I don't write much about Palestine in my fiction, perhaps for these reasons, and perhaps also because as a Palestinian who grew up in the diaspora in Kuwait and then Amman, I feel a sense of disconnect from, or a sense of illegitimacy to be able to write about Palestine from the perspective of someone who's from Min al-Dakhil. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's funny because I feel illegitimacy because I'm in الداخل. But I don't
Really?
listen to it. Yeah, because I'm a citizen of Israel, so you know our experience is a little bit different. I feel like, oh, you know, I'm not the OG refugee camp girl. Like, I'm really
Hmm.
not. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, there's not one Palestinian, like there's no pure Palestinian. Most Palestinians live outside of Palestine.
Yes, true. Very true. Um, but I think when I have been kind of asked to write about Palestine, my fiction, it's often been in genres. So I did the sci-fi story, which I found very fun to do, even though the story is quite dark, but I found it very liberating to kind of be asked to write about a Palestine that's set in the future. Um, and the other story, which will be coming out, I think, next year, is a superhero story. And it was the same thing. It was kind of, it gave me permission a bit to be free. In
Yeah.
the premise of the commission, there was
Yeah,
this,
it's like you went into a different. It's like when you know playing Dungeons and Dragons or something. Like you're going into a different. Like you're in fantasy mode now, so so you can allow yourself more.
exactly. And the current preoccupations remain. So it's just that it's kind of, they get adapted to the new genre or the new structure that you're given.
Also, your writing is very realist. Your fiction
Yes.
writing is very realist, and I can see how that can be. Yeah, like you're within the constraints of reality in a way. Like everything has to be plausible, believable. Dialogue has to be natural. Um, Whereas when you bend that a little bit,
Is your new novel, does it have surreal elements or?
no, it doesn't have surreal elements. It's a realist novel, but you definitely get characters that are like have very like characters that would say things that probably you've never really heard people say before. So I think I took some liberty with doing more extreme characters rather than like something very naturalist. it's a little bit exaggerated or comical or satirical. It's like trench coat coin.
Okay. Do you feel a certain amount of expectations in your writing currently because of the coin, or?
Yeah, I think people. Yeah, I do, but I try to not listen.
Mhm.
I, if I listened, then I wouldn't be a novelist probably. So
Mhm.
everything in my life set me against doing this. So, if we are where we are, like we probably have some stubbornness and rebellion to us that can make us, cover our ears and eyes and do what we want to do. Was it hard for you to come out as a writer?
Um, no, actually. So it's only in retrospect that I realized, but I was always interested in stories and interested in writing. And in high school, I was a drama geek. And so I, I would, and I was the one in drama class who was writing the plays and directing them. And I would act in them too, because, you have to as part of the course. But I remember just reading Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, and just and I was adapting it for the school play. And I entered this magical zone. I remember sitting in the new McDonald's that had just opened up. It was the first McDonald's in Hamman, kind of smoking cigarettes and reading Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, and just kind of feeling like I had been transported into this other universe. But I also have a very kind of middle-class Palestinian Arab father who's a doctor who the idea of writing was never something that was ever considered. And I remember in my last year of high school, he basically pulled me out of drama class so I could focus on economics.
Yeah.
And that was the point where I just put writing away, because I just thought there's just nothing practical in there. And it wasn't until the Arab Spring that I found myself returning to writing, because it created that space for me, where I was working in policy at the time, and I was very involved in the kind of the protests and traveling and meeting people, etc. And I just found the discussions that I was having, that there was just something missing, and fiction became the route for me to privately explore what was missing in a lot of those discussions. And that's how I ended up writing Guapa.
Oh, interesting, because I used to work as a journalist,
Mm-hmm.
and I also felt like something was missing from the narrative,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you read the newspaper and it's missing, like it's like, it's an object without shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Exactly.
and I think I was always into literature and fiction, but I think that's what made me realize that no, I need that other realm. Like I care in a way, I care more about the shadow than the object itself.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
I have a funny question.
Yes.
Maybe we don't have to put it in the podcast, but did you first come out as a writer or first come out as gay?
I first came out as gay. Yeah, and then the writing came afterwards.
So
Yes.
it must have been
Why?
easier. It must have been easier after that.
Oh, I didn't think about it in that way. Um, it definitely was harder to come out as gay, but I think it was easier to maybe put aside the writer aspect, because also, like, I'm not just a writer, I'm also someone who is um, very curious about the world, and I think I have a very strong sense of social justice. Um, and I think that was a big preoccupation for me, whether it was Palestine or the war in Iraq. Those were they took up a lot of my thinking um, in my late teens, early 20s, before literature kind of came back in my life. And so I felt very I think that curiosity about the world was a big part of me. And then once I kind of went out and explored the world, and I worked a lot in war zones in my 20s. So that was my 20s experience. Actually, I didn't go out clubbing, etc. Um, so I felt like after I had experienced all of that, I needed to integrate it, and writing became kind of the way that I did that. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful path.
Mhm. Yes, yeah. But now I find myself in my 30s, in my late 30s and now early 40s, I find myself kind of going back and re-exploring all of the things that I didn't do so much of as in my youth, like dancing, for example. That kind of thing uh, has come back for me. How much does desire factor into your writing? Is that something that you think about? I know that the body is very big in the coin. Um,
A lot, I think. I mean, yeah, it's there in the coin. It's there in my current novel. You kind of learn about yourself from when you look at your writing. You're like, oh, I really care about sex in a way that I didn't know I did. Um, so yeah, it's important, I think. Also, it's what I like to read. Like, it's often what I liked to read when I was younger, and I still kind of like a little bit of a naughty scene in a novel or something like that.
mhm.
So yeah, it's important. Yeah. How has that been for you?
Um, it's been a journey for me because I think when I was writing Guapa, in the early drafts, I skirted around the sex, and I would kind of cut a scene before the sex happened. And there was a friend of mine who had read a draft, and she was an older British woman actually, and she just said, "Do you notice that you cut the scene before the sex happens?" And that's all she asked. She didn't have any opinion, but that planted a seed inside of me, and I realized that I needed to confront that. Um, and so in Guapa, I ended up kind of continuing the scene, and I found it very necessary. And I think for me, I think my writing is very, especially these days, is very much preoccupied with desire. And I think that's partly because I was estranged from my own desires for such a long time that I kind of wrote myself back to
Mm.
those desires to kind of understand my relationship with them. And I feel like I'm interested in characters who are estranged in general, whether it's from their desires, from their homelands, from their families. And I think I'm very interested in exploring the impact of that distance, that estrangement, and how kind of your a character's expectations of the object or the setting that they're estranged from, um, their own expectations versus the reality of it, I think is always interesting to me in my writing. And I think maybe Palestine also is part of that in a way,
Mm.
having grown up with Palestine being such an important part of our family life while also being very much an abstract part of our lives because I only went there once as a child. And yeah.
Yeah, the things that we know but we don't, yeah, it's the mirage. Like it's like we know the mirage of something.
Hmm.
Um about sex. I mean, we grew up in cultures where that is so taboo that the fact that we can even get, write one sentence about it is quite miraculous because we've had to completely learn um like learn it from A to Z. And sometimes we do it but we don't know how to talk about it, you know so learning how to talk about it is like a whole other thing after getting over the taboo of doing, like, there's the taboo of doing it and there's the taboo of talking about it and writing about it. um
I mean, I would say that straight men in Arabic literature definitely have no problem writing about sex. Maybe sometimes too much and without a good editor. But I think that yes, for like, desire by female characters, female writers, by queer writers and characters, I think that's much less explored. And uh, it's something that I think you asked me earlier on about what I was preoccupied with when I was writing Guapa. And I feel like actually what I was trying to do, maybe not necessarily aware of it, was write myself into the literary canon and kind of make space for myself in the literary canon in all my own complexities as someone who is kind of Arab, but like maybe not, but living and existing in a Western context, queer, etc. And I feel like by writing Guapa, I kind of created that space for myself, which was liberating and allowed me then to focus on my other
You mean
preoccupations.
you stamped your existence?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, that's beautiful.
Do
Oh,
you feel that way at all, or not so
I don't
much?
think it was something that I was going for,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something that I feel now. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's somehow writing gave that to me. And I think also what's nice about writing a first novel that is, as you say, like you feel like it somehow stamps your own personal existence. So you don't have to do that with the next novel. Like you're already sort of like you put all your cards on the table, you know. Um, so I think the next projects you don't have to be as vulnerable or as declarative about who you are, you know. Like I'm finding that in my novel now, I don't have to do politics and sex and class and, you know, I can just do something a little bit smaller, more quiet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because there's something about the first novel that is like it's a roar, you know, like
Yes.
it's a teenage roar. Like
And that's the beauty of debut novels is they're kind of, it's your first entryway into the world and kind of announcing yourself, and then once you've done that big announcement, you can then focus on
yeah.
on other things.
Yeah, you can focus on on like your great great grandmother or something like this. I saw that your grandmother is from one of your grandmothers is from Nazareth.
Yes, originally. Well, she grew up in Haifa actually, but yeah.
Yeah, and I have three grandparents from Nazareth and one from Haifa,
Ah,
so we
really?
related after all.
Yes, maybe. Maybe. Yeah,
Shall we wrap it up?
I think so. I think this was a great conversation. Well, it was really nice to chat with you. As I said, I really loved the coin, and I'm really glad I got the chance to pick your brains about it and to get to know you. And I'm
Yeah,
really looking
thank you.
forward to your next one.
Thank you, Saleem. This was really special, and we talked about lots of things that were close to my heart, and I feel like you really understood me. So thanks a lot, and I can't wait for Floodlines.
I'm curious for you, Bisan, as someone who is Palestinian unhyphenated. Um, uh, I feel like us as Palestinian Americans, we take up a lot of oxygen. So I'm just curious, like, what's sort of your response to some of the themes they were talking about around like identity politics and positioning and stuff?
A lot of it was new to me. It was basically some of the things that never occurred to me because it was in the context that I grew up in. A lot of the aspects that they were struggling with or like talking about, it it was like new knowledge on how they struggled within the industry, how they're being framed, labeled, introduced to the world, or against their will sometimes. Um, and I can't let go of Yasmin saying, like, my novel was not about being Palestinian. It was about a lonely woman in New York, and how that can take away from her credit as a novelist. And I think she also spoke about that struggle one way or another. And I find it interesting. It makes me want to read the story even more because it eventually she will bring her authentic self, even if she says that this is not a Palestinian novel. You know what I mean? Like eventually it will happen one way or another. So it was, yeah, a really enjoyable conversation that I hope our listeners will enjoy as much as us.
I hope so too. And I hope that they'll also get to see sort of the through line of the richness of perspectives of Palestinians, because I felt like that was something that they really helped draw in that conversation, is that there isn't really like one unified Palestinian voice, which I think is an important thing to point out.